Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the FAA Alaska Aviation Safety Initiative, also known as FASI, release. My name is Jackie Holzman, and I'm the Deputy Regional Administrator for the FAA Alaskan region. It was just about 1 year ago when FAA Administrator Steve Dixon challenged us to provide him with recommendations on how to make aviation safer in Alaska, and to do it with input and feedback from stakeholders. That challenge ultimately became the FAA Alaska Aviation Safety Initiative, FASI, or Alaska Safety Initiative. In just a moment, I'm going to ask Administrator Dixon to open and see if we met his challenge. And when he's done, we'll go to Representative Don Young for a few words, followed by video comments from Senators Lisa Murkowski and Dan Sullivan. Administrator Dixon.
Thank you, Jackie, and good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. I want to start my comments by recognizing the Alaska aviation stakeholders and the FAA team who contributed so much time and effort over the past year to create a concrete plan for improving safety for everyone who flies in Alaska. I've learned a lot of things in my 4+ decades as an aviation professional. And one of them is that safety can't be dictated from above. It's got to be a partnership. We can't do this alone. We've got to work together. We know that. And our Alaska Aviation Safety Initiative is a true partnership in every sense of the word. We teamed up with the flying community to develop this comprehensive blueprint, and it's just that, for our future safety work. The recommendation in the initiative's final report are from the people who fly in Alaska every day and who operate the airports that are literally lifelines for the communities throughout the state. The seriousness with which the flying community took this effort was clear from the very beginning. More than 100 stakeholders attended a May 2021 virtual meeting when we presented the FAA's current and planned safety efforts in the state of Alaska. And throughout the spring and summer, we hosted a dozen more virtual meetings with pilots, trade associations, airports, and state officials to get their thoughts on what we're currently doing and what else should we be doing. Now, because of this partnership and this collaboration, we have a set of thoughtful, specific recommendations about how to improve safety in the state, where more than 80% of communities are accessible only by air travel. Now, among these recommendations are increasing and improving weather data reporting and forecasting, expanding automatic dependent surveillance broadcast, which we all know as ADSB, air traffic control, to more areas, and then also improving navigation charting. Now, these are just a few examples. The report also identifies and urges the continuation of some successful FAA initiatives, including the system of 230 weather cameras that have proven to be so valuable spread throughout the state. Now, while stakeholder input was the foundation of this effort, we also received and continue to receive, and we're very thankful for, the important support from Alaska's congressional delegation. Senator Murkowski, Senator Sullivan, and Representative Young have been absolutely critical partners and very important partners in our efforts so far. And we'll need their continued support and partnership to make sure that the FAA has the resources to get this important work done. Now, the report that we're here to discuss today is just a starting point. As I said a minute ago, it's a blueprint. Now that we have recommendations in hand, we're developing a detailed roadmap for implementing them, focusing first on the initiatives with the greatest safety benefits. We expect to complete the draft roadmap in early 2022, and we will seek stakeholder feedback. You can count on that. Meanwhile, we will continue initiatives that are already underway while incorporating aspects of the new initiatives by summer of 2022. Now, I continually remind myself of the importance of aviation safety as it applies to the aviation environment in Alaska. And one of the ways that I do that is something that I keep on my desk every day is a copy of Dr. Terry Krause's history of civil aviation policy in Alaska. It's so important to us, important to our entire country, and we know important to you. And I know that our shared commitment to make flying safer for everyone in Alaska absolutely will not waver. And we get this work, and as we get this work done, we will do it in an ongoing, transparent, and collaborative process. And we look forward to continuing the journey with all of you. Thank you. Thank you for your engagement, for your leadership, and your attention today. And now I would like to introduce Congressman Don Young, again, a very important partner and supporter in this effort. Thank you all.
Jackie, am I on? Jackie.
Coming through loud
You
and
are
clear.
on.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Administrator. I want to compliment you and your presentation on all this document. To me, it's crucially important. I'm very proud of the FAA and the stockholders. You managed to bring everybody together and come out with a good blueprint. That makes me excited because I've been with your operation for a long, long time before there was an FAA. And I'm proud of the work you're doing in Alaska. We know how, and you mentioned, dependent we are on air travel, and safety is one of the crucial factors we face. I'm an experienced pilot. I have made many statements about it's never been the plane, it's about the pilot. And I'm a classic example. I made a mistake. It was my fault. It wasn't the airplane. And because I hadn't kept up with the things that I should have been doing with my aircraft. I'm just, like I say, excited because the stakeholders, I've talked to them, we've worked together with you. The program has come out. Now we have to also keep in mind, this is a beginning, as you said before, that the safety is not something you can write on paper. It's an addition to training people how to fly safe. And with additional cameras, which you have, I think are great. All the recommendations of hardware is better. We have some progress to go forth. And I will say my role and the role of the senators is going to give you the resources in which to do it. And I'm asking you, Mr. Administrator, that very frankly, I hope in the president's budget next year, we'll have a request for monies. We ourselves can't put it in specifically for Alaska because there's a ban against earmarks. But the fact is, if you were to ask for it through the president, that makes it very easier for us to get the amount of dollars are necessary to do equipment in this report, which makes us a lot safer. I'm working very close with the Senate side. We have a good delegation because we know how important it is to have safe flying in the state of Alaska. I mentioned before, one of our biggest weaknesses in the state of Alaska, everybody has this Alaskan dream of owning an airplane, and I support that. I did it myself. But I will say that most of them are neglectful and learning the new technology, the equipment which you're proposing in this report. A lot of times the plane sits for a long period of time and in respect that they're not up to speed. And it's not in the report. I know the air carriers will support me, but I'm not sure about the general public. Very frankly, I think there ought to be a training certificate after a winter of laying off, so we are a lot safer because a lot of ours accidents are created by the lack of I call pilot upgrading. So I'm excited for this whole program. I again want to support what you put together, and it's a classic example where we get the stakeholders and administrators together. And Jackie, you did a good job. And I want to thank you for that. I think it's great importance for this project. So continue what you're doing. I'll be there for you. I want us to be safe. I want us to continue. As you know, we will not ever have the highway system that the lower 48 does. We'll always be a plane state. I know I mean that as an aircraft, not a plane state, but the ability to fly and to move and upgrade our airports, have the safety requirements, the new equipment, it'll be safer to fly. And it's not going to get smaller. We get more people coming to Alaska and there will be more airplanes. So I'm excited again and thank you. It's just an exciting period for me to have the working relationship with the stakeholders and the agency. It doesn't happen much nowadays. And so congratulations, Mr. Dixon. God bless you for what you're doing and your staff and everybody that's working together with this program and all the stakeholders. Those stakeholders, I want to thank you. You came to the table with ideas. I go through this life with everybody, not everybody, a lot of people bitching don't have any suggestions. And you came forth with some good suggestions, put them together, and you have made a good report present to the general public and to the Congress, and especially to the president and his budget request. So thank you all for your work. God bless you. And let's keep safe.
Representative Young, thank you. Thank you for supporting this effort. Thank you for your long-term support of FAA, of aviation safety, and for all Alaskans. We truly appreciate you taking the time to be here today with us. It means a lot to us. It means a lot to our stakeholders. Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
Okay, now we have a video from Senator Lisa Murkowski.
Good morning and thank you to Administrator Dixon and the FAA for inviting the Alaska delegation to participate in today's release of the FAA Alaska Aviation Safety Initiative report. The genesis of this report came out of the NTSB's Part 135 roundtable discussion that was held at UAA back in September of 2019. For too long, Alaska has led the U.S. in aviation accident rates, and sadly, in the rate of aviation fatalities. Too often we see a news alert of yet another tragic plane crash in Alaska, changing forever the lives of their families left behind and impacting entire communities. As NTSB pointed out at the roundtable, many of these accidents could have been prevented. I applauded the NTSB for hosting such an important forum and facilitating a discussion for an industry that is truly a vital lifeline in our vast state. Administrator Dixon heeded the recommendations made by the NTSB and announced in October of 2020 at the Alaska Aviation Safety Summit that he was tasking the FAA in Alaska to develop an Alaska-specific document that prioritizes safety initiatives throughout the state. To ensure this document would be Alaska-specific, Administrator Dixon welcomed input and recommendations from the aviation community in Alaska, and I want to thank the stakeholders who are also participating in today's release, and really to all those who took time to provide valuable input on the report. You've played an important role in not only informing the FAA, but in informing me on how to help improve safety in your industry. But we all know there's more work to do. We all need you to continue. We need you to comment on the implementation of the recommendations in the report as soon as you can, and with the support of the FAA in Washington. I look forward to thoroughly reviewing the recommendations on how to enhance safety for our aviation community, and know that I continue to commit to working together with you on those. So again, my thanks to Administrator Dixon, the Alaska FAA, and the many, many stakeholders for your hard work on the Alaska Aviation Safety Initiative report. I hope that this is a milestone for our aviation community and that we can turn the corner on Alaska's aviation safety record. Thank you. Be well.
Great. That was great to hear from Senator Murkowski. And we also have a video comment from Senator Dan Sullivan.
This is Senator Dan Sullivan, and I want to commend the team at the FAA for their focus and continued effort working with stakeholders in Alaska on the Alaska Aviation Safety Initiative. I've been pressing the FAA on this important initiative for a long time, as my goal is that this engagement leads to tangible benefits to preserve and expand the aviation safety assets and aviation safety infrastructure that are paramount importance to all Alaskans in all of our communities. Our communities, our pilots, our air carriers, passengers, and the general aviation community all deserve a safe, reliable, and well-funded aviation system like the rest of the lower 48, and not to be an afterthought during implementation of one-size-fits-all regulations or disadvantaged for infrastructure funding due to the size and geographic challenges that, of course, exist in the great state of Alaska. The discussion contained in this report paints an immense challenge ahead. Under the leadership of Administrator Dixon, the FAA is concentrating on the critical issues Alaskans have been repeatedly raising, and doing so with Alaskan voices to help guide the way. And I'm very appreciative of that. So I want to thank the administrator, the FAA, all the members there for their continued focus on these important issues for Alaska. We look forward to working with all of you on this important Alaska safety initiative for our state and our country.
Well, great. Thank you. I would like to thank our entire panel of distinguished openers, Senators Lisa Murkowski and Dan Sullivan, Representative Don Young for being here in person, and FAA Administrator Steve Dixon. Before we discuss the report recommendation with our panel of experts, it's important to acknowledge the participation of two important team members who are not on today's panel. Matt Atkinson, President of Alaska Air Carriers Association, and Howard Martin, FAA Regional Counsel for the Alaskan region. And I'd like to get started with Matt.
Okay. Well, hey, thank you, Jackie. Welcome from Utqiagvik, and good morning or good afternoon, wherever you may be. I didn't realize I wasn't on a panel, but thank you for pointing that out. And also, I wanted to mention to Congressman Young, if you're still on there, I wouldn't tout your aviation experience too much in this audience, as that we are still recruiting for pilots these days. So you may find yourself getting hit up a little bit from some headhunters. But wanted to thank.
I'd have to hand prop the plane, so I don't think that would fit in nowadays.
Well, we're looking for all comers. It has been a challenging and interesting year for those of us with COVID, for those of us in the aviation industry that are serving communities for critical transportation of medical supplies, vaccine teams, critical personal travel, and it's been busy. And that's a quick report. Foremost, we want to thank Administrator Dixon for his leadership and foresight to commission this FASI project. I think that was a key thing. And then second, really like to thank the team who translated all of the interviews among all of the stakeholders into a report with recommendations in the same calendar year. That's very impressive. And I know that Howard Martin, I think, really deserves special recognition for that, because he was, I think, the author of many of the reports that we saw and all of that. So thank you very much for that. We support, as the industry and the Alaska Air Carriers Association, the recommendations in the report and focus on new aviation infrastructure. This has been noted that it's going to reduce aviation accidents for the Alaska Air Carriers as well as general aviation throughout the state. And folks certainly don't want to be remiss in thanking our congressional delegation for steadfast support with respect to our concerns, and who have worked very closely with FAA Administrator Dixon and to support this initiative. So that's where we're at. As I said, the Alaska Air Cares Association supports the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which will provide new funding for airport and aviation infrastructure. Of course, the theme that I hear that keeps coming up is that the determination of success is going to be, well, whether any new infrastructure actually is realized for Alaska. And I think that that's all the point where we're at. In 1995, NTSB concluded that the development of Alaska's aviation infrastructure was probably the most requisite object in reducing accident rates. Yet today, there's roughly, despite our progress, there's roughly 100 communities, numerous tour routes, mountain pass routes that lack, basic aviation weather reporting, adequate communication infrastructure, and other aspects that are necessary for safe operations in Alaska. So at this point, I guess the closing part of my message would be that we appreciate Administrator Dixon's efforts, and we ask for your continued personal leadership in addressing FAA funding for Alaska projects. I think that we have identified projects, and at the recommendations on, I believe, page 28 of the final report, that we agree on those, but we do need to get them funded. The aviation industry seeks improvements to aviation safety. We encourage you to employ all avenues available to within the FAA to direct funding to Alaska. Our message is infrastructure and funding of that infrastructure for Alaska. It's time, and I think we've put in the groundwork to make it happen.
Matt, thank you. We appreciate your current support. We appreciate your longstanding support. We appreciate your advocacy and appreciate you being here today. I'm going to now ask a quick question of Howard Martin, and Howard provided us not only legal guidance, but his 30+ years of experience in Alaska has been critical. Howard, can you tell us a little bit about your role in this initiative?
Yeah, and I'm going to focus on our process. First, I want to say good morning to Matt. I'm a little further south than you. I'm at the headwaters of Vermilion Bay in Maurice, Louisiana. So we're about as far north and far south as you can get. So, but yeah, when I first heard about this, I did sit on the round table. I didn't know what was going to come out of it. And when I heard Administrator Dixon's proposal, I was pretty excited. I was intrigued. I must admit, at the risk of being reprimanded by some of my peers in the FAA, that emotionally I looked at it from the lenses of pilot goggles and not as an FAA lawyer. So I'll call it cautious optimism where we would go. But as we got into it and as we saw the charge from Administrator Dixon, it was exciting because it was different from anything I'd seen before as a pilot, as someone that used the Alaska aviation system. One, it wasn't narrowly focused, it was broader, more holistic. And, there was a real direction from our administrator that we want to dig down deep. We want to get real input from the external parties, to make this a meaningful process. So when we took off there, this is a new thing. This is not something the FAA has done before. We had to kind of learn as we go. It was not going to be a rulemaking committee, and it was not going to be like a public forum, but rather, a very focused, directed process where we would take our current plan programs, things that are to focus on things that are reasonably achievable, not Star Wars, pie in the sky, theoretical things, but to try to gain insight both internally and externally over the things we could actually do, things we could reasonably implement. So we started out in this process internally first, cataloging and describing all the current planned programs. We, created an interim report so our external, partners could review what we're doing, get a clear idea of what we're doing and what we had planned. And the idea is we would get real meaningful input. That means criticisms, where are the warts? Where are we missing the priorities? What should we do different? And the process was not going to be a group setting, but rather we scheduled individual settings. So there was not what I'll call the downside of group dynamics, but where each individual stakeholder could provide detailed and focused input on what we were doing right, what we were doing wrong. So we had goals in mind. We want to get real input. We want to make real changes and develop real priorities so it makes a real impact on safety and mortality rate in Alaska. At the end of the day, one of the biggest things we thought that should come out of that is also transparency. Because there's a tendency sometimes when government work not to always be transparent to the people out there. In Acadiana, we always say that the best boiled crawfish are cooked in the daylight hours because you can see the colors change when you put them in the pot. So doing government work, I think, is the same way. Doing it in the daylight is going to achieve the best product. At the end of the day, we need internal accountability. People within the FAA need to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to do and focusing on those milestone goals. But also, it's just important we have external accountability, whether it's, Representative Young, the senators, whether it's the external stakeholders, the interest group, the general public. They need to know how we're performing. Are we making meaningful strides to achieve these goals? And we're convinced with this process and the transparency we'll get there.
Great, Howard. Thank you. Your participation was critical. Transparency is important, sometimes challenging, and I'm hopeful we're living up to everyone's expectations. I'm now going to introduce our panelists. And as I do, you can all turn on your cameras and we'll go directly into the recommendations. So our first panelist today, Christy Warden, is our acting regional administrator for the Alaskan region. And in her position of record and her major role in FASI was the director of our Office of Airports. Clark Dessing is the director of the Western Service Center in the Air Traffic Organization. And Karen Gaddis is the acting deputy director of General Aviation Safety Assurance in the Flight Standards Service. And those are our FAA panelists. Our stakeholder panelists, we have Lee Ryan, the president of Ryanair. We have Dennis Parrish, Director of Flight Operations at ConocoPhillips. Adam White is the Government and Legislative Affairs Advocate for the Alaska Airmen's Association. Tom George is the Alaska Regional Manager for the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. And Jody Gould is the Planning Manager for the Alaska International Airport System, part of the Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities. And I'm going to jump right into our recommendation 1, which is enhancing aviation weather reporting and forecasting. Accurate weather reports are critical to flight planning. And today, the authoritative aviation weather reports come from FAA authorized systems, and those systems are spread across Alaska, but aren't at every airport where they're needed. As part of this initiative, Alaska is exploring adding new and existing systems. I'm going to start with Christy Warden. Speaking as the director from our Office of Airports, our stakeholders from airport owners and operators to air carriers and pilots are all interested in more weather reporting systems. I understand there is a pilot program underway to acquire automated weather observing systems, AWOS. Can you provide an overview of the program and a snapshot of our progress to add new AWOS in Alaska?
Certainly, and thank you so much, Jackie, Administrator Dixon. We sure appreciate you being here, Representative Young. So AWAS is such an important element, the ability to have additional ground-based weather observing systems at airports in Alaska. Not only is it critical for IFR flight planning, but also for the VFR pilots as we obtain weather data for our locations, it enhances safety, etc. We were so pleased at a new provision in the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018, which really came to the aid of airport sponsors, airport owner-operators, so that they can approach FAA for funding for additional new installation AWAS units. And the FAA, the new provision was the FAA will take over these units for operation and maintenance once they are installed on site. That was an important element, an important new provision, because typically as an airport sponsor, an airport owner operator, it's an expensive proposition, not only installing the system, but funding annual maintenance for upkeep, maintenance and repair of elements. We are so fortunate to have this new provision. And so here in the state of Alaska, the Alaskan Region Airports Division is collaborating with airport sponsors to install new AWAS units, which will be subject to the FAA takeover provision in the Reauthorization Act. Presently, 8 of those units are at least halfway through installation, nearing completion of installation in the coming months. And importantly, we will get to the point of FAA takeover, commissioning and takeover, which will relieve the financial burden from the airport operators for ongoing maintenance and operation. This is essential. It enhances safety. It's a direct contributor to that, to safety enhancement in Alaska for safety of flight. And we are so pleased to be a part of this pilot program to really be enabling it in Alaska. After the 8 units are installed, commissioned, and taken over by FAA, the prospect is very evident for additional new installation units in the state of Alaska, and that will make a significant difference, and we're so pleased.
Thank you, Christy. It is an exciting program. We're all looking forward to seeing the conclusion of this project. Clark, the FAA has a new weather reporting system under research and development, Virtual Weather Observing System, or VWAS. What is the status of the research and development pilot, and what do you see for the future of AWAS?
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. As you mentioned, VWAS is an experimental automated weather system. It combines a 360-degree weather camera with a suite of weather sensors to provide aviation weather. Now, it's currently being tested and evaluated at 4 of the Alaska airports: Palmer, Gila River, Eek, and Tatulit. Now, we anticipate testing will be completed by early summer, next summer. Initial testing results look very promising, but as with all experimental systems, testing is just step 1 of a multi-step process. Now, some of the benefits we see from VWAS would be creating a cost-beneficial weather system alternative that could be put in use at airports that do not have existing AWAS or ASOS systems.
Thank you, Clark. That's another exciting program we have underway. Lee Ryan. Ryanair flies across Alaska all day, every day. Your company relies heavily on weather reports for every flight. In your experience, how will additional weather reporting systems affect Alaska pilots and enhance aviation safety?
Jackie, thanks for that question. See everybody. I'm Lee Ryan from Unalakleet, and I'm a Nukbat Eskimo, president of Ryanair, and really appreciate everybody coming here. First, I want to highlight the collaboration on this effort, the FACI effort. I want to talk about the report just briefly. The report's progress, its responsibility, and its value. Every 20 or so years, the FAA puts pen to paper in terms of comprehensive aviation progress, and this report really puts value as an Alaskan living in Alaska and as an American. By law, the FAA has boundaries confined to the traditional cost benefit analysis. And this gives the FAA and the government a reason to look at every Alaskan as a living, breathing American. To your point, to your question, Alaska does have challenges. We have environmental challenges. Climate change is real. It's difficult. It's hard to operate. Infrastructure, we have an integrated network of airways up here, and the lower 48 has them too, but they call them highways. We fly in Alaska and accept who we are and what we have. When we fly in the lower 48, that comes up from time to time. We realize then that we actually are different. When I was in flight school, I'd fly from Vero Beach to Savannah, Georgia for some sweet tea and pecan pie, and it's about 270 miles, and you have no less than 15 weather reporting stations. When I go home to Unalakleet, Anchorage to Unalakleet, it's about 340 miles. You have 4 weather reporting stations in that distance. To improve safety, we need to adapt to the climate. We need reliable and comprehensive weather reporting. And to improve safety, we need infrastructure. I'm happy that the FAA has 8 new AWOS units in progress. And I'm looking forward to VWAS certification to give comprehensive weather access and better forecasting up here in Alaska to make us, feel American. So thank you guys, and I hope that covers your question, Jackie.
Great. Thank you, Lee. We appreciate your commitment to safety, your commitment to Alaska in general. For recommendation 2, which is our navigation strategy development, one way the FAA supports navigation is through development of airways or highways in the sky and the equipment to support the airways. We are transitioning from ground-based systems to GPS-based systems to help pilots navigate. The highway in the sky must ensure that aircraft remain clear of obstacles and terrain, mountains, and structures, and are the shortest distance between points. Sometimes these goals are in conflict. FAA is exploring how to ensure safety of flight while keeping aircraft out of icing conditions and while maintaining direct highways in the sky. And I'm going to direct this question to Dennis Parrish. Dennis, from the perspective of a North Slope operator, how important is a navigation strategy and the development of the highways in the sky?
Thank you, Jackie. It's exceptionally important. And first, I'd like to say to Mr. Martin, yes, I think we are as far as ways we can get. I'm actually in a little camp on the North Slope, about 12 miles south of the Arctic Ocean. So isn't technology wonderful? Yes, what we've got in the North Slope of Alaska, and especially the western North Slope of Alaska, are a lot of communities that are absolutely, as stated earlier, very dependent on the navigation system that's in place, the GPS, and most importantly, the wide area augmentation to the GPS, which gives a much higher precision of where your location, and it gives you altitude, much more precise altitude also. And if you're going to do an approach called an LPV, which has saved many lives, that approach that the FAA developed here in Alaska has been very useful. And it's important that coverage not slack in any way as WASP satellites are changed in the future. And we can see from how this committee is going that there's full support to make sure that that type of coverage is still in place. You've got Point Lay, Point Hope, you've got Atkinson, you've got Anaktuvik Pass. These are all places where I'm sure Lee can also attest. And in a past life, we have had calls at the middle of the night. We have a true life and death emergency that we need to get to these places. And before some of these systems came in place, it was very difficult to accomplish the task. It's so much better now. And with this committee, we can see that is going to be getting even better in our ability to respond. The state's, the provider's ability to respond. From my side, yes, there's a lot of energy development in this part of the state. That's very important. But I think more importantly, to have the approaches for those and the weather and the support, the routes for that kind of an operation. But most importantly, the communities up here are extremely isolated. And what this committee is doing and what's been done is exceptional in improving quality of life, safety, health, just about everything it takes. If everything you're doing has to be flown in, this is a great augmentation to it.
Well, great, Dennis, thank you. Our North Slope communities are isolated and do depend heavily on your ability and our air carriers' ability to get to them when they need us the most. Thank you. For recommendation 3, which is around aeronautical charting, FAA publishes charts that pilots use to navigate. We're focusing on a couple. We're focusing on sectional charts in the chart supplement Alaska. A sectional is a map and a chart supplement is a book. And I'm going to direct this question to Tom George from the Airport Owners and Pilots Association. Tom, you're a member of a working group called the Mountain Pass Working Group that is working to enhance the sectional charts. Can you please tell us about the focus of this working group and any recent accomplishments?
Yeah, thank you, Jackie, and a pleasure to be here today. Alaska has certainly seen a number of accidents over the years associated with mountain passes, and we thought that some additional information on the charts could help reduce that statistic. So we did bring to the FAA in 2019 this issue, and they took it up as and assigned it to us as a task to work. So we have a working group that's looking into either adding additional passes, in some cases perhaps removing some if they're not needed, and more importantly, looking at if we can add some information on the charts to help with situational awareness as pilots are flying those. These are almost exclusively flown under visual conditions, and what you see out the window is what you get. So where we are today is that the FAA has initiated some change proposals, which will have to work through the system to actually change policy on more substantial changes on the charts. But in the meantime, we've looked at some of the areas, and the FAA as recently as last week added elevation values to some 60 mountain passes on the Alaska sectionals. So we've got progress happening and more to go, but I'm optimistic that we'll actually be able to do something to help people navigate those mountain passes more safely in the future. And thanks for asking.
Great, Tom. Thanks. There's a lot of work to be done, and we are walking through it step by step with your help and the help of everyone here today. For recommendation 4, which is surveillance. When flights are conducted under instrument flight rules, or IFR, FAA tracks the location of the flight to ensure safety of flight. The preferred system for surveillance today is the Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast, better known as ADSB. The research for ADSB was conducted in Alaska under the Capstone program, and the safety benefits from the system, in addition to the surveillance, was documented. In Alaska, ADSB is not required in the environment where many flights occur. In the absence of an ADSB requirement, FAA is encouraging voluntary use of ADSB based on the safety benefits from using the technology. And I'm going to direct this question to Adam White from the Alaska Airmen's Association. Adam, in most of Alaska, ADSB isn't required. Can you talk to us about the benefits from ADSB from a pilot perspective?
Yeah, you bet, Jackie. This is a great process, a great project. It's been incredible to see how the FAA and industry is working together. And from what I understand, that is not always the case in other parts of the United States, but we do have this great working relationship across all these lines of businesses with the industry and the FAA. And you know, our membership usually is not the commercial operators. It's the folks that use aircraft for their personal life. And while we may not be professionally employed as pilots, we strive to be professional in our aviation activities. And this technology is an incredible tool that we have access to now. And the FAA is working hard. Actually, it was just recently announced that there's funding available, and so process has started to be able to get more ground stations for that component of ADSB, which will help us get information into the cockpit and also help the FAA with their side of that whole program. So the benefits to this is when we're out flying, the traffic avoidance component of this is probably the biggest tool that we're able to use in the absence of the other ground station component. Of being able to know where other aircraft are while we're flying, and then being able to deconflict as we converge on these rural airports is a big help. The ability to be able to get the weather data into the cockpit when we're in range of a ground station is incredible. I remember flying back in the mid 90s, going across the state and having to wait until I got in range of a ground station to be able to call the FAA and get a weather report, and be able to then make that decision as I was continuing the flight or not. And now today we can display a lot of this information in the cockpit on either an iPad or in other formats in the airplane. And it's an incredible tool that has great potential. The battle is trying to get more people to equip. And the battle is to find funding for the FAA to finish deploying these ground stations in all the areas of the state where we can have access to it. So looking forward to that further collaboration that's already been exhibited. And we're going to keep going full steam ahead.
Well, thank you, Adam. That's a couple of great things that you were able to share. We do appreciate the collaboration. We are all stronger together, and that FAA is moving forward with the remaining areas needing ADSB is a great accomplishment. We have one more recommendation, and then we're going to go to media comments. The final recommendation is around safety outreach. And sharing our safety message is a priority for FAA and our stakeholders. Maximizing the efficiency of our events was identified by stakeholders during our feedback sessions. I'm going to direct this question to Jody. Jody, Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities is a large stakeholder for FAA in Alaska. What aspects of your collaboration are most effective, and do you see ways for other stakeholders to build on your experience?
Hi, Jackie, I do, and thanks for having me today. Unlike most other airports in the lower 48, the majority of airports in Alaska are owned by the state, 237 to be exact. So stakeholder outreach involves many types of stakeholders, from 747 cargo pilots to K2 aviation otter pilots flying tourists around Denali, to individuals flying seaplanes, to a remote location where they're trying to fish for their bucket list. So reaching and engaging with stakeholders is no small feat. Successful safety outreach requires technical collaboration and stakeholder education, as well as listening to the folks on the ground to understand their maintenance and operational challenges. Examples of DOT's outreach relative to technical collaboration and stakeholder education are many. We have partnered in the past with FAA to produce coloring books to educate our kids who live in the remote villages about the importance of not vandalizing runway lights and markers. For the larger airports, we have meetings that are held between aviation planners, engineers, and FAA project managers to ensure all parties understand the technical elements of a project, including runway width, lighting requirements, and so forth. Communities and village leaders participate in aviation projects also through community and village council meetings with state and federal planners who discuss and negotiate property changes, easements, land lease proposals, noise mitigation, and so forth. And state safety inspectors work with federal inspectors and airport managers to confirm processes as well as infrastructure to ensure all meet the safety regulations and expectations. The other element of safety outreach in Alaska is fostering a culture of aviation safety. It is critical to make sure flying safely is in the hearts and minds and daily work of aviation service providers, because our passengers rely on us to return them in the same condition as when they left. I think this FAA report has re-energized Alaska's aviation community and the culture of aviation safety. And I think if we can mimic the spirit of collaboration, transparency, and active listening to all stakeholders' input, by which the FAA report was developed, that we can all move forward together. The detailed recommendations, including funding and expansion of infrastructure, as well as continued participation in aviation organizations, reminds us that we are a team of airport operators, pilots, engineers, planners, legislators, federal inspectors, and regulators. And we're all working together to keep Alaska flying and thriving, which is DOT's mission statement. Thank you.
Jody, thank you. The safety culture is so important. And your example of starting with children is the best place to start. Something you can build on for a lifetime. I want to thank our panelists for your flexibility and your commitment. We are now going to transition to the media portion of today's event. And to lead us in this, I am happy to introduce Matthew Lehner, the FAA Assistant Administrator for Communications. Matthew.
Thanks so much, Jackie. I think we have a few reporters with us still on. If you do have a question, if you can use the raise hand feature, and we will make sure that we get to you. I think the first question is going to be from Eric Stone. And I think if each reporter, if you have a particular person that you're interested in having answer the question, let us know. If not, any of the panelists or other FAA individuals, please jump in as well. Eric, the floor is yours.
Hi, so this question is for the FAA and any of the stakeholders that participated. So the National Transportation Safety Board has 2 recommendations on its most wanted list that are not included in those 5 primary recommendations. Namely, those are mandatory safety management systems and mandatory flight data recorders with cockpit voice recorders for all revenue passenger operations that include Part 91 and Part 135 operators. So why were safety management systems and flight data recorders not included in the FAA's recommendations?
Matthew, I could take that if you'd like.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so Eric, a fair question. Going back to what I tried to describe in the beginning, this was not an aviation rulemaking committee. This was not a rulemaking process. So it went outside of our charter, what we were supposed to do. Those recommendations would be handled through a separate process, an evaluation whether rulemaking is called for, and then the formal steps that are required by statute to adopt rules. So that's the reason that was not part of this process.
And Eric, we have a little bit more information on the SMS rule and Part 135 operators that we'll make sure we get to you over email as well.
Wonderful, thanks very much.
I think next up is Zoe, and if each reporter can identify who you're with, that'd be great as well. Thank you. Zoe?
Hi, this is Zoe Sobel with KUCB in ProPublica. And so my question is for the FAA. most of the recommendations in this report direct the FAA to continue current efforts rather than begin new ones or increase funding or financial support for any of these efforts. So I'm wondering, is there something new here, and what recommendations specifically came out of the working group's work?
I think, Christy, if you want to take that one first, and then anyone else, we'll turn it over to Christy Warden.
Sure, great, thank you. And fair question, Zoe. So the answer is yes, there are new initiatives that are in this report. And there is one element where the report recommends the FAA seek funding sources. So the new initiatives are the new installation AWAS, with particular reference to the FAA takeover of the same for ongoing maintenance and operations. This is a new provision in the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018. It's a provision that has not been implemented here in Alaska prior and is underway right now. So I would submit that that is new. Following the installation of the first 8, there is a high likelihood that additional units will be installed under the same. Another provision, of course, is the VWAS, recognizing that VWAS is experimental presently, looking for the FAA to complete the research and development, and importantly, seek funding for installation of VWAS units. So those are a couple of new provisions, and I see Karen coming on. She also would have a couple of new provisions.
Thank you, Christy. I was going to emphasize the VWAS because we know that's a game changer, especially for folks that don't have access to weather right now, or some of the, I believe there's like 23 airports that do not have, they have approaches, but they don't have a weather reporting system. So what's done differently, Zoe, is that it has become a priority. And so there's so many initiatives when you look at the appendix, but VWAS rose to the top of the list. The majority of the feedback we had was access to weather. And so that is what I believe is very different about this, is that we're in our next phase, we'll be able to make those priority decisions.
Got it. Sorry, can I ask a follow-up, Matthew?
Sure.
Karen and Christy, thank you so much for your answers. I guess part of the reason we're asking this question is over the past year, ProPublica and KUCB have done a lot of reporting on commercial aviation safety in Alaska. And just last month, we released a story talking about solutions that experts and stakeholders in the industry think would help make commercial aviation safer. And, you know, AWAS and VWAS are both things that we've talked with the FAA about. You know, at the time of publication, those were items that were already mentioned as things the FAA was working on before this final report came out. So are you saying that AWAS and VWAS came out of the work of the FAA and the plans to, you know, add more AWAS units and try and test and expand VWAS and see if it can work for the state? Did that come out of FAA?
No, Zoe, it didn't come out. And of course, it is true that there were units installed in Alaska prior to the FAA effort. The most important thing that came out in terms of the ground-based weather reporting units for the AWAS is the takeover. And I cannot emphasize enough how important that is to the airport owner operators in the state. Let's think about Alaska Department of Transportation. 240 airports in their purview. How would they afford to install additional new AWAS units if they had to absorb the cost for annual maintenance and operations, et cetera? So I would submit that the takeover provision is absolutely new, as is, the VWAS certification as we arrive at that point. And, you know, it's important that FASI is also all about prioritization of existing programs also. So, yes, you'll see some of the recommendations are ongoing, but this report prioritizes those and also captures the synergy. There's a word that hasn't been used in this broadcast, and that's the word synergy, which is very evident. Think about the stakeholder input and the feedback that you saw here in this presentation, dovetailing with the work that the FAA already has underway. The synergy is extraordinary, and I would submit it's higher than at other times, and that will lead to the success.
Thanks so much. I think we have time for one more question. Zoe, I would also remind everyone that these recommendations were largely based on the feedback that the agency received from the stakeholders that you've heard here today. We wanted to understand what they believed would also have an impact and get their input. So this reflects not only the FAA's views, but also the stakeholders that you've heard from today. Agnel, if I believe I'm saying that correct, we'll take you last and then wrap it up. You're on mute.
I wasn't sure if I was unmuted there.
There you go. Great.
Well, I appreciate that. My name's Agnel. I'm a reporter with ProPublica. I've worked with Zoe at KUCB on the stories that she's mentioned. Had a question for Representative Young about the funding aspect of this and the legislative aspect of this. He mentioned that he wants to see, if I understood correctly, he wants to see, additional funding called for in the president's budget around some of these issues. I'm just wondering if you could kind of elaborate on that, and also any other steps, either from a funding or legislative perspective, that he thinks Congress can take on the Alaska aviation safety issue.
I think we lost the congressman. I know he had a tight schedule, but we're happy to get you in contact with his office to get those questions answered.
Great, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you again to everyone, to members of the press who attended, and also all of our stakeholders, and then the other FAA individuals who have been a big part of this. We appreciate your participation, your questions, keeping us honest along the way. If any reporters on the call have additional questions as you are writing or your editors ask, go ahead and email pressoffice@faa.gov. That's pressoffice@faa.gov. We'll get your questions answered. Again, thank you everyone for attending, and we will hopefully see you sometime soon when it's safe in Alaska after the pandemic.